Well, French President Emmanuel Macron says France has already significantly reduced the number of its troops in Africa. Macron made the statement on Monday ahead of his four-nation tour of Africa on Wednesday. The French president will first jet to Gabon for an environmental summit, then fly to Angola before heading off to the DRC and then the Republic of Congo. Macron's announcement also comes at a time when anti-French sentiments have increased in some former French colonies, including Mali and Burkina Faso. French troops have been helping some of its former colonies in the fight against the insurgency in the Sahel region in the last decade, including Chad and Niger. Macron has, however, clarified the move is not necessarily a withdrawal of troops, but a reorganization of French forces' presence on the continent. Some of the countries that had military cooperation with France have since turned to Russia to assist them fight militants. Mali and Burkina Faso have in the recent past asked French ambassadors to leave and also requested French troops to exit.
Basically, the logic is that our model must no longer be that of military bases as they exist today. In the future, our presence will be in bases, schools and academies that will be co-managed. They will be staffed by French personnel who will remain, albeit at lower levels, and by African personnel. And they will also be able to welcome other partners, if our African partners so wish, and on their terms. I personally have no nostalgia for France's sphere of influence over former colonies in sub-Saharan Africa, but I do not want to leave an absence or a void behind. As much as I do, and above all, beyond my own contribution, you will be the heart of this partnership, and your own commitment will give full meaning to the political choice we have made with our parliament to enhance and make safe this partnership policy with, once again, unprecedented funding.
Well, we're staying with that story, and for further analysis, we now have Ovigwe Eguegu, a policy analyst at the Development Reimagined. He joins us live via Zoom from Ankara in Turkey. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Macron's second visit to Africa within 8 months. What do you think is behind this escalated diplomatic foray by the French leader?
Well, French president's visit is actually part of a trend we've been noticing since the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict. Several, high-level officials have come from different parts of the world, particularly from Europe and even from Russia as well. So I think realizing that Africa is a very important region with regards to global politics and diplomatic weight of the continent is one of the main reasons why we're seeing these visits from all of these foreign ministers and leaders from these countries. But for France in particular, one of the factors that is really driving his insistence and the emphasis on Africa is actually because of so-called anti-French sentiments, which I like to call pro-nationalist sentiment, because these countries are actually not really against France, but the populations are actually arguing for their national sovereignty, for their national interests to be top and foremost in the hearts and the minds of their leaders. So I think that erosion of so-called French influence is actually one of the main factors, and that is actually necessitating this visit. So in West Africa, we're seeing withdrawal of French troops, and also in Central Africa. So President Macron is trying to reorganize the relationship, but it's doing more of a window dressing, not necessarily addressing the root causes of the problem.
So I want to speak a little bit about some of what is happening now, because from what we're hearing and just from the speeches that he's giving and from what he's saying, it seems as though it's indicating that French troops are here to stay in Africa. What are the likely implications for this, especially in the Sahel, where, again, it seems as though anti-French sentiment rather is growing?
Yes, because the military is a core part of how France has maintained his chokehold on this part of the world. You would recall up until last year, we had about 5,000 troops under Operation Barkhane, which was launched in 2014. And they've been present there, the fight, working with regional countries as the mandates indicated for them to fight terrorists. But in that same time, we found the situation has not gotten better, rather has gotten worse. Burkina Faso, for instance, back in 2014, had total territorial control of its country, but now today it is struggling to even hold 60% of its territorial region. So it is not really productive for these countries, and that is why we've seen successive governments ask for the withdrawal of French troops, because they just cannot point to what the benefits have been. But what President Macron is insinuating now is a bit of a restructure. So rather than having these troops engage in kinetic operations, they want to go more into military academies and trying to work with countries who are cooperative, like Niger Republic. But again, that is still not the solution that African countries need, and that is still part of the approach to strengthen its influence. And again, that influence is a problem for many of the countries in the region, because they just do not see the relationship with France to be very productive.
So I want to ask you about some of what Macron said. He had condemned what he termed as efforts to reduce Africa to a field of competition. But global powers have in the past year sent delegations to Africa. How can Africa leverage on these visits and benefit its people?
Yes, the only way that is possible is if these visiting delegations and high-level diplomats are actually listening to the people on the ground, are listening to the government, are listening to to people on the streets. But for the French, that is not what was seen. They literally had to be chased out, from Burkina Faso, from Mali, from CAR, despite the fact that repeatedly, populations in this country have been talking about, the need for the government to send these forces out. And I think for African countries, there's a recognition that systemic solutions are actually what is needed, not just military troops from France or from wherever. These countries need real economic growth. Let me give you an example. Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger, Mali are all at the bottom 10 of Human Development Index in the world, despite decades of strong collaboration or French partnership. How can these countries consistently be at the bottom of global development, and you are claiming that the relationship has been productive? It's just not been. So that is why you see there's so much resentment on the street. And President Macron needs to understand that it is the economics that is going to solve this problem, not necessarily, changing his military strategy.
Thank you so much for your insights, Ovigwe Eguegu, a policy analyst at Development Reimagined.